Lights, camera, action!
Hello everyone! It's me, Teacher Izag, your MAPE 7 teacher. How was your day? I hope you are all doing good. Are you ready to learn a new lesson? Today we are going to talk about what is theater arts and the different theatrical forms in the Philippines. Theater is a collaborative art form which combines words, voice, movement, and visual elements to express meaning. The field of theater encompasses not only live, improvised, and scripted work but also dramatic forms such as film, television, and other electronic media. Due to the increasingly pervasive influence of contemporary theatrical media, theater has enormous importance in citizens' lives. Theater is about the examination and resolution of fundamental human issues and is built on understanding and presenting interactions between people. The evolution of theater arts in the Philippines. The performances we see today are mere products of the cultures that have influenced the country through the years. Let's take a look at how the history of Philippine theater has evolved. Pre-colonial time. During the prehistoric times, theater in the Philippines was in the form of indigenous rituals, verbal jousts or games, or songs and dances to praise gods. According to early chronicles, prehistoric dramas consisted of three elements: myths, mimesis, and spectacle. These mimetic performances mostly dramatized primitive rituals and epic poetry about deities and mystical legends. These mimetic performances mostly dramatized primitive rituals and epic poetry about deities and mythical legends where the spirit of the deities would seemingly possess a katalonan or priest or babaylan or priestess. During this entranced state, the priest or priestess would consume the sacrificial offering, which could be in the form of a pig, chicken, rice, wine, or nuts. Seemed to shoot flames for her eyes. Her hair stood on end, a fearful sight to those beholding, and she uttered words of arrogance and superiority. Juan de Plasencia, 1590. Spanish regime. When the Spaniards reached our shores, they used dramas such as zarzuelas as a pedagogical tool to influence the pagan tribes and teach them about Christianity and religion. Another important form of theater popularized during the Spanish colonization is the comedia, also known as moro-moro, linambay, or orakyo. It's a play in verse that portrays the lives, loves, and wars of Moors and Christians. Moro-moro is a secular comedy that dramatizes the war between Christians and Muslims through the forbidden love between the prince and the princess. The comedy is resolved with the non-Christian being converted to Christianity or through his or her death, immediately followed by his or her resurrection. Comedias were normally performed in the pueblos or village centers to attract more people to the foundation of its regime. The comedia can last anywhere from 3 to 15 hours through a series of performances. The Filipino Comedia was performed in Latin and Spanish by Father Vicente Puche in Cebu in 1598. On the other hand, a zarzuela is a form of musical theater that combines spoken word and song that celebrates various Catholic liturgical feasts. Jugar con Fuego by Francisco Asenjo Berbeiri was the first zarzuela introduced in the country in late 1878 or early 1879. Zarzuela. In the Philippines, the zarzuela is a play with the songs and dances usually written in prose, containing from 1 to 5 acts. depicting the vagaries of romantic love among idealized Filipino characters, and often incorporating contemporary social, political, economic, and cultural issues for relevance and interest. By August 17, 1893, Teatro Zorilla, the home of Zarzuela, was inaugurated. Throughout the 333 years of the Spanish regime, the Philippines was widely influenced by their culture, tradition, and religion. Today, zarzuela and comedias are still being performed, albeit with other cultural influences and contemporary touches. American colonization. When American colonial rule was established, the United States introduced the American way of life through education, media, and language. Their influence on Philippine theater is most apparent through the vaudeville or vaudeville, and the plays and dramas staged or translated into English. In 1898, the first vaudeville was produced by the Manila Dramatic Guild for the sole purpose of entertaining American soldiers and other Americans residing in Manila. It was also the first theatrical performance since the Revolution. The vaudeville is not a straight-up play. The theatrical performance is, in fact, a mix of songs, dances, comedy skits, and even magical performances. Local audiences bought in, and productions soon found themselves becoming entertainment spectacles that can be transported from one town to the next. Not long after, the vaudeville was interjected into comedias and zarzuelas as intermission number known as jamborees. In 1930s, the country was introduced to Broadway theater or stage plays through the westernized education that was provided in the most private schools for privileged children. Shakespearean tragedies and comedies as well as Western classics were performed in the original English or English adaptation. The Japanese occupation. By the 1940s, when the Japanese took over the Philippines from the Americans, movie actors and actresses could no longer appear in films, as the Japanese confiscated all film equipment. However, the comedia, zarzuela, and vaudeville remained in the country as form of entertainment and expression. Eventually, the vaudeville evolved to become stage shows or variety shows with a short melodrama at the end to accommodate the actors and actresses who moved their craft to vaudeville in theater. Venues such as the Manila Grand Opera House and Savoy Theater became homes of vaudeville. After the war, movies returned to popularity and the vaudeville era slowly lost its luster. Stage shows became small, cheap performances held in open-air stages in the provinces. Sadly, the vaudeville deteriorated decades later to become burlesque, a strip show held in cheap theaters around American military bases. Philippine theater as we know it today. After the Japanese occupation, the Philippine theater has evolved to become an amalgamation of the various influences such that of zarzuela, comedia, vaudeville, and Western classics. Theater was largely performed in English during the time, as it became a large part of classroom education. Meanwhile, zarzuelas such as Angkiri, Dalagang Bukid, and Paglipis ng Dilim became well-known beyond their regions. By the 1950s, theater had moved out of the classroom and the concept of paying for ticket to see the theatrical performances emerged. These legitimate theaters was held in closed theaters. These became events in themselves, not just mere parts of a celebration or religious ritual. During this time, playwrights such as Severino Montano, Wilfrido Maria Guerrero, and Alberto S. Florentino honored their crafts and contributed to the development of performing arts in the Philippines. Through the years, Philippine theater groups have staged numerous plays in both English and Filipino, be it written by a Western or local playwright. Spanish culture and traditions largely influenced performing arts in the Philippines, but the contemporary style is borrowed from the Americans. Classic shows such as The West Side Story and Sound of Music made waves in recent years when it took the local stage. Philippines also has epicos or epic stories that are being performed live with music, dances, and spectacles. The Filipino word epic is epico from the Spanish. Philippine epics are lengthy narrative poems based on oral tradition. The verses were chanted or sung while being passed from generation to generation before being written on paper. The plots of the stories revolved around supernatural events and heroic deeds. With the diversity of ethnic groups in the Philippines, Filipino epics are not national in scope the way the Kaliva is in Finland, for example. Instead of glorifying national heroes, Philippine epics are specific to a particular part of the country, and thus they are referred to as ethno-epics or regional epics. In fact, the epic poems of the Philippines are in many different languages, not just the currently dominant Tagalog. Cenaculo, another performing art stemming from religious customs, is the cenaculo or passion play. This is the dramatization of life and death of Jesus Christ and is usually presented as a community activity during the Lenten season. This still endures to the present, ranging from simple productions to more technically sophisticated and modernized version. Then we have Philippine folk dance. The history of Philippine folk dancing incorporates influences from immigrants and conquerors while at the same time maintaining distinctly Filipino roots. Philippine folk dancing is a true reflection of the daily life in the past centuries while enchanting modern audiences at the same time. There is no recorded starts to Philippine folk dance. As long as there have been people on the islands they have been dancing. In fact, their mythology is filled with many different gods and goddesses that needed to be placated, implored, or thanked for various natural events like rain and harvests. Many of these festivals still feature ancient folk dances performed in costume and tribal period. It is impossible to know when exactly dancing became part of life in the Philippines. Many traditional dances were designed to thank the gods for natural and agricultural events such as rain and harvests. The dances were performed during festivals and remembrances of past military victories, and still are performed at celebrations of birth and weddings in modern times. Many modern folk dance festivals still feature ancient dances performed in costume of the tribal period of the Philippines. Philippine folk dance mirrors the culture and tradition of the Filipinos. It has also been a source of culture identity of the people. In this diversified country, there are also great diversity of dances in different form of dynamics that grow out of various times, situation, and experiences. Last but not the least is the duplo. The duplo is a poetic debate presented through song and dance, which originated from indigenous courtship custom. Poets used proverbs and riddles to present their suits to the woman of their choice. This ultimately evolved into a more formal debate on issues and started to be called the balagtasan.
God, it's a rock!
Isn't it fascinating how this art form evolved and became part of our culture? I hope you have learned many things about the Philippine theater arts. See you on the next video lesson. Stay tuned, like, share, and subscribe. Bye!